Alrighty, hello everyone. For those of you that are tuning in super speedy, let me just get one last thing set up and we'll go ahead and get started. So just a second. Alrighty. Hello everyone who's just tuning in. We're going to wait just about one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so it's just about 2 o'clock right now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello everyone, my name's Katie and I'm the Interim Director Curator here at the Clark Historical Museum in Old Town Eureka. And on today's Ask the Curator, I'm going to be talking a little bit about 4th of July traditions here in Humboldt County and how they've kind of changed over time, while some of them have kind of stayed the same. So if you have any questions along the way, I will be checking the comment section on Facebook on this video. So you can just go ahead and post your questions there. And if I catch them along the way, I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll answer them at the end. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. So one of the big ideas is that the passage of time, what's important to a community, and external events influence how and why holidays are celebrated in different communities. And that's something we'll kind of talk a little bit about throughout this presentation. Particularly, the first part here, early celebrations. So of course, Humboldt County was, well, kind of this post-settlement period was about 1850 onward, which was kind of close to that Civil War period. So the first countywide 4th of July parade was in 1861. And you might be surprised, but maybe not also, that the parade was led by Seth Kinman, who's pictured here. He's one of the more recognizable figures from Humboldt County. He's kind of one of the more famous and also notorious characters around. If you haven't heard about him, you should definitely look him up, kind of learn a little bit about his story and how it ties into Humboldt County. So Seth Kinman led the parade in his buckskin suit, his token outfit of choice. And he was followed by school children, fraternal groups, including the Sons of Temperance, which was a temperance organization, and the Odd Fellows. A local woman named Nellie McGeorge also was in this early part of the parade as the goddess of liberty, and then military officers kind of followed behind. So of course the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. So that first countywide 4th of July celebration was right at the beginning of the Civil War. So, but by 1864, there were many locals who were feeling helpless towards the skyrocketing death rate of soldiers who were fighting in the Civil War, not necessarily because they were dying on the battlefield, but because they were dying from injuries they sustained due to poor sanitation in hospitals, really bad living conditions. It was a very big issue for the Union Army. So there was an organization, or there was a kind of a section of the Union that created something called the U.S. Sanitary Commission. And there were newspapers across the country that encouraged people to support the Sanitary Commission, because what they were doing was the Sanitary Commission was raising money. They were sending it to the battlefields, to these hospitals, to support Union soldiers and help keep them from dying from their injuries or from just their living conditions. In Humboldt County particularly, the Sanitary Commission support for it was very, very strong. And it's pretty incredible how much these Sanitary Commission kind of projects could raise here in Humboldt County. So for 4th of July in 1864, many of the events that were typically held to be celebrations were instead turned into fundraisers for the Sanitary Commission. And these fundraisers raised the equivalent of about $13,000 in 2018 dollars in a county with a settler population of only about 2,000. I remember reading somewhere that Humboldt County actually had one of the highest participation and fundraising rates per person in the entire state of California. So people in San Francisco were saying, look at Humboldt County, they're doing a great job helping out with the Sanitary Commission, which is pretty incredible considering that the Civil War was kind of taking place almost an entire continent away. So women were highly involved in these events, and these 1864 Sanitary Commission events marked some of the earliest ones where women were taking more visible roles as community builders. And one great example of that we have here at the museum is this quilt. So if you've been to the museum within, since the 90s or so, you've probably seen this quilt. It was made by women who were part of the Sanitary Commission, and it was made using silk that was probably bought in San Francisco and delivered up here. But they got together, they hand sewed this quilt. Each of the flags represents a different state. And what they did was it was used as a fundraiser tool. So they'd auction this off, but when the person who won the auction won the quilt, they would always end up donating it back, and then it would be auctioned off again until the fundraisers raised a certain amount of money. And at the end of the war, this quilt was delivered to someone that Humboldt County held very dear. A guy named Ulysses S. Grant, who was stationed at Fort Humboldt for a time and then later became president of the United States. He was also a noted leader in the Civil War. So Humboldt County was pretty proud that he spent at least some time here in Humboldt County. So they sent this quilt to him. It was in his family for a very long time until about the 90s. And then it was sent back to Eureka. And now we have it here at the museum. It goes on display about every 2 years or so. And it's an incredible shape considering how old it is. So of course, the Civil War comes to an end and celebrations kind of change a bit. They become more festive. People are more excited about getting together, celebrating, having a good time, enjoying the summer. So at many of these celebrations, there would be games like tug-of-war between teams of loggers, for example, that took place at Sequoia Park and New Era Park. There'd be fireman competitions. Nowadays, they're called musters. One of them would be they'd be racing pull carts with hoses on them as kind of a form of entertainment. There are concerts, performances held by local and traveling performers. One performance consisted of a guy on a tightrope passing between the roof of the Humboldt County Bank at 2nd and G and over to the Vance Hotel, which is kind of harrowing. That's a pretty high up expanse, but it's a short expanse. So, and then another one has to do with this picture that we have right here, and that is hot air ballooning. So this is a picture from a later time. This is from 1911, but you can imagine the technology didn't necessarily get much better between the mid 1860s and 1900s. But they would fill a balloon using a fire on the ground and a pipe to somehow kind of siphon it into the balloon. And then a guy would ride up the balloon on a trapeze and then parachute off. And one time the guy brought a dog with him, and the dog had his own parachute, and the dog survived the jump. But there were kind of common complaints of that's inhumane to the dog. So they stopped doing that here in Eureka. If you want to know more about balloonists particularly, it's a pretty fascinating history. We have a guest blog post on our museum blog from Jim Garrison, who's the archivist at the Historical Society. It's a pretty wild ride. I definitely recommend checking it out. So let's see here. So 4th of July this year is going to look quite a bit different than it has in past years. So let's go visit a 4th of July celebration from 1881 with a little bit of a twist. So this is an advertisement from one of the local newspapers talking about a 4th of July celebration in 1881. It was going to take place on the private grounds of Dr. J. Clark and his house. It kind of notes, and sorry, it's kind of blurry. This was hard to get into a readable state. But this was at the foot of Clark Street. And here they give you kind of a rundown of what was going to be happening that day. But they don't give you any times. They just kind of say, this is going to happen. And then this, and this, and this, and this, and this, throughout the whole day. So we got music, we got a prayer, we got some more vocal singing instead. We have the reading of the Declaration of Independence, music, again, by the Eureka Cornet Band, oration, which is the speech, vocal music, some more music, and then a benediction at the end. And then this would be followed by a parade, or not a parade, a picnic. And then you can kind of see off to the right here, there's some other things going on at a place called South Park. There were races, like horse races and foot races. And I don't think it was this one, but other later times they have motorcycle races and car races and all kinds of races. And then of course, picnics. So let's take a little trip and let's kind of experience this 1881 4th of July celebration. So the first thing we're going to see here is a performance by the President's own U.S. Marine Band. And this is a song, a military march called the Stars and Stripes Forever. So you might have heard something like this while you were watching a parade, people marching by and people on the side of the road waving and cheering. And John Philip Sousa, who was the one that wrote this, was the first director of the U.S. Marine Band. And his marches are very famous and still played today. So let's take a look.
John Philip Sousa led the Marine Band to new heights of popularity during his tenure as leader from 1880 to 1892. It was during this era that he earned the title the March King, a well-deserved nickname that continues to this day. Of the 136 marches he composed, one has stood out above all the rest. It was composed in 1896 as
Oh no. Sorry about that.
John Philip Sousa led the Marine Band to new heights of popularity, tenure as leader from 1880 to 1892. It was during this era that he earned the title the March King, a well-deserved nickname that continues to this day. Of the 136 marches he composed, one has stood out above all the rest. It was composed in 1896 as Sousa sailed back home from a long European vacation. The inspiration for this march was born of a combination of homesickness, fond memories of his time as leader of the Marine Band, and his stirring recollection of the American flag flying over the White House. The resulting march became his best-known work, and in 1987, it officially became our national march, the Stars and Stripes Forever.
All right, had a couple weird technical things there, but yeah, pretty great march got going on there. So you can imagine something like that playing at a parade, maybe something like this parade. Look at that Uncle Sam figure. What a great costume. So this picture is from actually just outside the museum here. You can see in the red box those two kind of interesting architectural features. You might recognize those off the top of the Ramones building. So this is just outside where the museum's at. And so the building kind of right next to it isn't there anymore. So, but we got people hanging out on the street, sidewalks and walking and parading. There's some people sitting on the windowsills upstairs. This is another photo of a parade, 4th of July parade. The arrow is pointing out a float that's for the Knights of Pythias, which was a local fraternal organization. But it seems like a pretty festive occasion. We got people all over the place. We got a dog, we got kids, we got a float. Very festive. These kinds of holidays were very big in this area because it got people to come together and celebrate, the country. Here's another one. This one's from Fortuna, 1911. So this is the same year as that balloon photo we saw a little earlier. All kinds of people in the streets. Looks like we have our Lady Liberty in the center of the float, it looks like, or the Goddess of Liberty. One of those two figures kind of factors into many of these present, events. All kinds of people having a good old time. Here's another one, 1925. This is right near the Eureka Inn. So this is on 7th Street. And these are, it looks like they might be the Boy Scouts, but there were also another group around here that sometimes they dressed quite a bit like the Boy Scouts. They were the Congregational Cadet Corps. And they were based out of a church, actually, just, I think, kitty corner to the Eureka Inn. So they're getting prepared for a parade. They got their flags. Everyone's kind of getting ready to roll. And I'm not really sure where this picture was taken. It was somewhere in Humboldt County, but we got a very festive looking float The two things that catch my mind are the umbrella, the very jaunty umbrella with the tassels and things. And then also this hood ornament. Check that thing out. I mean, that's got to be like a real bird, I would guess. It might even be like a golden eagle if those are from around here. But whatever it is, they went all out on their float. And here's one more. So this is our Fortuna Motorcycle Shop boat float. I would assume this is in Fortuna, but you know, everyone's got their own float going on. So you can imagine, so it's 1881, you wake up and you go and check out the parade, and then maybe you're going to go to Dr. Clark's house or property to go see the rest of the things going on for the day. So the next thing you might see is someone reading the Declaration of Independence. And while this doesn't really happen, I think, anymore here in Eureka, it does happen elsewhere in the US, particularly Washington, D.C., outside of the National Archives specifically, where the Declaration of Independence is housed. So this is a short clip from 2012 when there were historic reenactors that were brought in to read the Declaration of Independence. Those actors represent Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Ned Hector, who read at the very end, which we won't see in this clip, but he reads all the names of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, and it's pretty impressive. So this was read, shouldn't be the second, it should be July 4th, 2012. And this is just a short clip. The entire reading of the Declaration of Independence takes about a half hour or a little bit longer, depending on who's reading it. So let's check it out.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good.
He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature. A right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
The guy who plays or is kind of portraying John Adams is quite engaging. When I first watched this video, I was like, whoa, that guy is excited and very on character. So, okay, we've listened to the Declaration of Independence, or at least in part here. What's next? So a lot of times there would be speeches by different people. So this is an article from 1906. This was in Blue Lake, the Blue Lake Advocate. There was a large Union presence in the Blue Lake area, about 700 members or so. And the Union kind of leaders who were kind of organizing this 4th of July event wanted to invite a Union speaker. So they invited this guy named Andrew Forsyth, who's pictured here, and his name's kind of boxed on there. So he was a union rights kind of leader, and his particular focus was on the rights of sailors. So prior to him and all the work he did to help improve the work conditions of sailors, it was very unsafe. There were not very many regulations on how, you know, mercantile companies could treat sailors, things like that. So he did a lot of work in improving sailing working conditions. And later on, of course, this is, 30 years down the road or so, but in about 1934, he led the call to have an entire West Coast shipping strike. And it was a huge thing. And I might have mentioned it in previous presentations. But anyway, so Blue Lake invited him to come and present at their 4th of July festivities. And this is still, this is in June. So they didn't know if he was going to be able to make it. I guess Labor Day, they wanted him to come and present, and he was unavailable. So I'm not exactly sure if he actually ever made it out. But besides that, you can see kind of in the corner here, there will also be a monster parade that should eclipse anything ever held in Blue Lake before. If there's one thing local newspapers like to do is they kind of, in previous years, they really like to jazz things up a bit. So you'll see this kind of verbiage throughout. So of course, okay, we hear our speaker talking a little bit about 4th of July, talking about how this holiday kind of relates to our own communities and our histories as a community. What's the next thing you go do? Gonna go have a picnic, hang out with all your friends and neighbors and family. So here's a picture of some people picnicking in the redwoods. It looks like they just kind of picked up some pieces of wood off the ground and made a little bench and made a table and are cooking something tasty. And then here's kind of another one. So this article, A New Meaning for July 4th, was written right before the end of World War I. And it kind of gives you an idea about how local immigrant communities were trying to integrate into these holidays. And this was also kind of an effort to kind of fight off the idea that there were immigrant communities in the US that were against the war. So one quote I wanted to highlight here is, "It is a grand opportunity for the societies," which are different fraternal orders highlighting different ethnic groups, "founded to perpetuate the ideals of the fatherlands, to spend the day in one grand demonstration of their loyalty to America, their adopted home." And this is when kind of the melting pot mentality was also very, very popular, as in people would immigrate here from elsewhere, they would kind of melt all together, and they would start accepting these generally American, air quote kind of things, American ideals, things like that, while also still maintaining their distinct ethnic kind of, parts of themselves. This picture here that we're looking at, so this is at a picnic for local families from Denmark. You can see the Denmark flags kind of in the background, along with American flags. And these kind of picnics would be held for all kinds of different things, even outside of 4th of July. And of course, you're at your picnic, and what would be a picnic without some kind of more entertainment? So this is a group picture of a local firefighting group. And this happened to be the championship team on July 4th. There would be firemen's games, also known now as musters. And there were all kinds of different categories for those games. But one of them is kind of a spin on the bucket brigade. So, this is before sprinklers are built into homes or, apartments and places of work and all kinds of things like that. This is before modern day fire extinguishers, fire alarms, things like that. So one of the ways you might have to put out a fire is literally by filling up buckets and throwing the water on the fire. So that was a skill that people who were firefighters had to keep up on, and it became kind of a form of competition. So if you haven't seen one of these kind of firefighting bucket brigade competitions before, we'll take a quick look at one. You'll notice the bucket on the right here has a rounded bottom, and that was a thing so that the buckets were used specifically for fires, not for random water uses for other things. So they had to be hung on a wall or something like that. So they wouldn't be used as mop buckets or water buckets for dogs or anything like that. So let's check this out.
Let's go, boat 16! Go! Get boat 16!
All right, let's get. So you can imagine that'd be a pretty fun summertime activity, being able to watch something like this or participate in it, particularly if it's a very warm summer day, which we do get occasionally here in Eureka. And then, you know, you got your picnic, you went to your firemen's games, you got to see some loggers do some tug of war. What else is going on? So this is a newspaper clipping from 1916, Humboldt Times. And there's a couple of things in this article that are kind of fun. So the first one is this last sentence in the first paragraph. And it says, let's see, celebrate the anniversary of that great day in the history of the nation when we riz up and swatted King George. Old newspapers are just so much fun to read sometimes. Sometimes they're awful, but sometimes they're a lot of fun. And then the second one to highlight here is that, so, you know, you might have gone to all your fun activities, motorcycle races, car races, and then there's going to be dancing afterwards, dancing in the afternoon and evening, and a hot chicken supper that will be served at midnight. So I kind of mentioned earlier that these kinds of holidays were things that brought people into town, maybe people that were living far out and might not travel into town all that frequently. They might come in and join their friends and families in different festivities, go to dances, things like that. And when there were train lines going through the county, there would be special trains that would run people out to the coast or here to Eureka to participate in different festivities and things like that. And then, of course, here, local newspaper at its greatest, it says the greatest 4th ever attempted in the community here in Ronerville. So let's see. So dances, what kind of dances were going on? Here's a teeny little clip talking about some of those dances. And actually, before I forget.
The ladies stand in a circle in the center of the room. The men walk in a circle around the ladies. The ladies show off their handkerchiefs, which they are about to throw. They throw the handkerchief. The gentleman dances with the owner of the handkerchief which he catches, and thus they have found a new partner for this dance.
So yeah, these 4th of July events are big social deals. They're ways for people to meet new people, ways to catch up with the people you might not see very frequently. And one other kind of interesting tradition that popped up in my research was this one. So Independence Day will have wedding march. Many couples lay down their independence as the 4th approaches. And a couple other little quotes from this. County Clerk Fred Kay yesterday afternoon was wiping beaded perspiration from his brow, the result of an unprecedented rush for marriage licenses. It was a trend in 1925 and 1924 where people wanted to get married on the 4th of July. And so this article kind of talks a little bit about that, like 9 couples in this situation. Last year, there were 8, you know, and another year, I think they mentioned there was 10. And then they list all the people that are getting married. And one of the kind of funny things that they mention is maybe a reason why people want to get married on the 4th of July. There will be no occasion for the husband to forget, for there will always be plenty of firecrackers to remind him. It was kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't heard of, people getting married on the 4th of July. So there were a couple more other kind of traditions that people locally picked up. But there are a couple traditions that I want to just specifically outline before I mention them. Please don't try them at home. These are traditions that don't necessarily take place anymore, particularly because they are kind of dangerous. So one of them was something called anvil blasting, where you would use, certain chemicals to shoot an anvil in the air. And like I said, I do not recommend trying this at home. So to help kind of persuade you maybe to not try this at home, I'm going to show you a video of it so you can see what it looks like, but not try it at home. And also, just a heads up, there are loud booms in this video. I'll try my best to turn the volume down so it doesn't blow your speakers out. But just a heads up, if that is a concern, you might want to mute your computer for the, I think it's like a 30-second video. All right, let's take a look.
Ah.
Okay. Oh!
So pretty intense in terms of finding ways to entertain yourself during the 4th of July weekend. I highly, again, do not recommend trying this. The next one, and the last one, is over in Arcada. There was a thing at one point in time where people would have a bonfire burning in the middle of the plaza and would be tossing flaming balls soaked in camphene, which is a type of lamp fuel, tossing those around during the 4th of July holiday. And this specifically was in reference to a kind of during the Civil War event in Arcada. So that's why it kind of mentions fireworks and bonfires were retained as important events to hold in celebration of the holiday, having a lightening effect on those who viewed them during the Civil War when things were, the national consciousness was kind of down at the time. So let's see. So with that, as you kind of sit and think about traditions that we have here in Eureka today when it comes to 4th of July, you'll notice that some things have changed. The passage of time, which is important in a community, and what is important in a community, and external events influence how and why holidays are celebrated in different communities. I mentioned that at the beginning of this presentation. With that, we're active participants in the maintenance, preservation, and innovation of celebrations, traditions, and holidays. So you can imagine how, especially now with the coronavirus and the kind of lengthening impact of it, and all kinds of other events that are going on right now, how do you think these are going to affect the traditions locally, regionally, nationally? How might those traditions change, but also how might they stay the same? What things are we celebrating with these holidays and these traditions? And how are our lived experiences now as a community, as a region, as a nation, going to influence how those holidays are celebrated into the future? It's something to think about. And you can imagine, even in your own families, traditions change over time. They stay the same. They come from things that affect your family. They come from things that affect your neighborhood, and all kinds of things. So something to kind of think about as we go through this holiday and the many holidays to come as this coronavirus event continues. So with that, I want to say thanks for tuning in. We have about 20 minutes left, so feel free to ask any questions you have in the comments section, and I'll go ahead and try to answer them. real quick though, before I forget, the museum is reopening July 8th. So next Wednesday, we will be reopening at 9 a.m. and we'll be open till 4. And following that day, we'll be open 9 to 4 Wednesday through Sunday. We'll also continue posting our online content through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and our website. So if you aren't able to come in while we're open, you can always catch up that way. Let's see. And yeah, we will continue doing different online things. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and check the comments and see what questions people might have. So we had someone ask, is he on stilts, talking about Uncle Sam in that picture a little while back. He kind of looked like he was. Let's go back really quick and check that out. I know when I first saw that picture too, I can't tell if it's just like the positioning of the picture or if he's just really tall or if he is on stilts. I'm not really sure on that one. All right, so then what else do we got? So he is a scenery chewer. I might have missed what that was in reference to. Do we know where that is? I'm guessing that's one of the parade pictures. I tried to list the ones that I knew where they were from. Oh, the Bucket Brigade competition. Okay. So that one, I'm actually not sure where that one's from. It's not a local one. I had to look it up on the internet to find a video of it. Then we have a question. What's happening this year in Eureka and Arcada? So Eureka canceled its fireworks show due to COVID. I don't believe Arcada has one. I think theirs is usually with the Crabs game, which the Crabs aren't playing this season. The Crabs are the kind of the local baseball team. So I think theirs is also canceled. Fortuna is still going to have their 4th of July fireworks show. But since they're kind of the only people in the county that are going to have one, it's probably going to be very busy. So exercise caution and preparedness in that. They said you should be able to see it from pretty far away as well. So keep that in mind. And then no questions, I'm cooking, but what a delightful presentation. Thank you. Well, thanks for tuning in. These little presentations are a lot of fun. I enjoy doing them. I always learn something new and, kind of gives me an opportunity to share more of this information with the public while, we're still closed. And then museum hours and Wednesday through Sunday, right? Yep. So we're open 9 to 4, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday during the COVID times. And if, things are changing so rapidly, if things do change, we will be updating our website. You can also always give us a call or send us an email before you come by, and we can let you know if we're open, if we're closed, things like that. But we are trying to do our best to get the word out as soon as we know we're going to be open and if, any of that changes. We also got a question, any upcoming events at the museum? We don't really have any events right now, just due to the whole COVID thing going on. Kind of the main concern is that public health doesn't want different households mixing. So when you have an event, it kind of requires household mixing. But we are looking at doing virtual events to celebrate the museum birthday in August. So keep tabs on that. If we have any other events, they'll of course be on our Facebook, our website. We always also try to get it out through local media, through North Coast Journal, Lost Coast Outpost, and the Redwood News, and any outlets we can get to. So, all right. Any other questions? Let's see, let me go back through these. What a hood ornament, that's crazy. Anyway. Cool. So if you enjoyed this presentation and maybe there's a topic that you want to see us talk about, you can also put that in the comments section. We kind of have ideas rolling throughout, the weeks of all of this going on. Next week is going to be trivia So if you enjoyed our trivia kind of a couple weeks ago, you might want to tune in for this one. It's been a lot of fun to put together. There's all kinds of just local history things that work well for trivia. So yeah. Yeah, any other questions about 4th of July, things like that? Okay, so we have a question. Dave wants to know if there were any Confederate sympathizers in Humboldt County during the Civil War. That I am really not sure. I haven't really looked into it. Actually, I haven't looked into it at all. So I don't really know. But one thing that comes to mind with the Civil War in Humboldt County is that, once the Civil War ended, there were plenty of people that moved out west. And as you might know, the Clark has a historic weaponry collection, and there are a number of guns in there that date to the Civil War. Some were standard issue for the Union troops during the Civil War. I don't think we have any issued guns from the Confederate side, but we do have ones from the Union side. And they're pretty incredible to look at. They're currently off display, but when they are back on display, be sure to come by and check them out. Scenery chewer, actor playing John Adams. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. He was so excited. Yeah, and if you get the chance, I know the National Archives is doing a presentation of the Declaration of Independence this year as well. They're just not going to do it as like a big event thing. They usually have like a parade and all these people in costumes and people speaking and music and all kinds of stuff. But they're going to be doing it virtually this year. So I'm looking forward to see what they come up with. But they have many of the videos of past Declaration readings up on their website. And the clip that I showed you, actually, which is from 2012, the early part of the reading of the Declaration of Independence was actually done by descendants of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and Ned. And I have a heck of a time with last names sometimes. But their descendants read the first kind of part of the Declaration, and then the reenactors read the second half. So it's kind of an interesting tie between history then and history now, is bringing in those the reenactors and then having their descendants today, or in 2012, do the reading of the Declaration of Independence. All right. Any other questions? Well, so I might take off now because there aren't any more questions. But if you have any questions later on, feel free to put them in the comments, send us a message, things like that. We'd be happy to answer them. With that, I hope you all have a safe 4th of July weekend. And I hope it is rejuvenating and you get to spend some time with the people in your household. And we hope to see you back soon next week when we do trivia. I'm really excited, can you tell? We will see you next week. Have a good weekend. Thanks, guys.